Hi, Avi.
Hey Scott, how are you?
Good. I'm sorry I had trouble getting in. I was trying to use the link I had was for the general registration for some
Yeah,
reason.
this is a new system we're using, so thank you for bearing with us. We're using this new one that was highly touted, and my team is here as well. And we just started broadcasting to let the broader audience join us as well.
Okay, so I wouldn't have been late, but it wanted to open up a new window, and I don't know what.
No worries. Are you in the office?
No, I came home actually a little early.
Oh, nice.
I wanted to be here at home and cover my messy desk. And I'll take a book to have in case I need to reference it. How's registration and how's attendance?
Joel, my associate director, is here also. Do you know how attendance is right now?
We actually can't see attendance on our end, but we do know 115 people registered.
Okay, good.
We will get an attendee list after the event.
Okay.
And Scott, that was Joel, my associate director, who's helping us in the background.
Hi. Okay.
I love, by the way, I just read your article quickly. You just sent, and I love it. And I'll tell you why. I was a Judaic Studies major at Binghamton, and I took the classes that you're exactly referring to, and I could not agree with you more on your outlook on it.
Thank you. It's a disaster. It's really a disaster.
Totally. I think some people have joined us. We're going to take just another minute or so and get to our conversation with Scott Shay. Thank you, everyone, for joining us who's here so far.
I do have a pretty hard stop at 8, though. I have something.
Absolutely, no problem.
Okay.
We're just going to do another little less than a minute, and then we'll get started, everyone.
I am glad you sent me the new link, though. That could be part of it.
Yes, everyone's joining. I just double checked on our end. All right, everyone, we're going to get rolling. We have a limited time with Scott. Just quickly before we get started, I want to thank you, Scott, for your time and for your willingness to join us with Alums for Campus Fairness. For those who don't know or are new, Alums for Campus Fairness is the unified alumni voice to counter anti-Semitism, anti-Israel rhetoric on campuses throughout the country. We have over 30,000 members within our network and operating in more than 50 chapters at colleges and universities across the country as well. We're really proud of all the work that we're doing and proud of all of our lay leaders, volunteers, activists who have really helped us kind of move the needle on campuses. As we know, campuses are troublesome right now in regards to anti-Semitism, and the role for alumni could not be more important than it is today. And we are thrilled to bring Scott Shay to our newest virtual platform. We are thrilled to have Scott and honored to have it. Scott is a leading businessman, thought leader, and author of several widely read books on issues facing the Jewish community. His most recent book is Conspiracy U, which you all, the first 100 people who sign up, you will be getting a copy of. You can see it in the background of Scott's home office there. So it's a great book. I read it. I couldn't put it down. It was very relevant to the work that we do. Scott is a co-founder also and chairman of Signature Bank in New York City. And we are thrilled to have Scott, who's joining us from Manhattan, New York, to be with us today. And, I don't want to take away your time, Scott, the limited time that we have for you, but I'd love for you to maybe give us a brief synopsis on the book. Why did you write the book? Tell us a little bit about what it's about, and what are your takeaways from the book today, and obviously the responses today as well.
Well, we can get into more depth as in the Q&A too. So I'm going to really hit sort of the top of the waves, as it were. I didn't actually intend to write this book. I had spent 5 years writing my previous book in good faith, and that was enough for a while. I had been working on that book, doing a lot of book talks on it. I started writing a 2,500 word article, essay. It was going to appear in something like Tablet. And it was going to be lessons I learned from my father in commemoration of his the 75th anniversary of his liberation from Dachau. And I went back because while I was at Northwestern, a professor at Northwestern University, Arthur Butts, came out as a Holocaust denier. And he wrote a very thick, heavily footnoted book called The Hoax of the 20th Century, in which he alleged that the Jews made up this whole Holocaust thing. It was a myth. And I started to think about some things that my father had said, and I went down the rabbit hole and actually read the book. Most times we read about these anti-Semitic texts, we don't actually read them. We get what's a digest from the press or from the Jewish press even, or from sources. And, the same thing goes for Amnesty, the Amnesty report. It's a 400-page report. I have it sitting down the way. If you actually read this, it becomes a lot more distressing than even the summaries. So I read the book, and here's what I found. Yes, he's a Holocaust denier. Yes, he hates Jews. But at heart, he's an anti-Zionist, he claims. That's what's in his heart. Zionist Jews, and he's a professor, so he realizes facts exist at least. So he creates, and this was the thing that really clued me into what was going on the far right and far left. In that also at heart, but this he doesn't say, he's a conspiracy theorist. And conspiracy theories are very interesting things because they are theories that no matter what facts you present, the theory goes around the facts and engulfs them. So, for example, there are tens of thousands of documents that demonstrate the execution of the killing of the 6 million Jews in Europe by the Nazis. So what does Arthur Butts do? Professor Butts, he comes up with the theory that Jews and Zionists forged these documents and planted them along with the Wannsee conference minutes all across Germany to be quote unquote accidentally discovered. And then what about all of the people who confessed to being or witnessed being perpetrators, being witnesses, bystanders, guards, involved in the final solution, involved in the murder of the Jews? Well, he claims that these were pure, innocent Nazis who were bamboozled by clever Jews to confess to crimes against humanity that they would never imagine actually committing. These were good family people, better than the Americans in many ways. So anytime you present a fact, demographics, this is 400 pages of any fact, somehow this evil cabal of Jews, that's the conspiracy, have hoodwinked, he uses the words hoodwinked, bamboozled, the rest of humanity. So look, that's the far right. And most Jews, including myself, thought that was where the big risk to the Jewish community was from the far right. But then I started reading what professors on the far left were saying at Northwestern University and at other campuses. And they were just as much of conspiracy theories. Professor Stephen Thrasher, chair of the social justice reporting at the Medill School of Journalism, considered one of the top two top two journalism schools in the country. They argue that, at least. And he writes, he's not a leader like Arthur Butts is on the far right. He's as my father would call him, a nuchschlepper. He's sort of a follower on, and he writes and tweets theories about Jews, conspiracy theories about Jews. They're just as insidious. Talks about Jews, Israelis sending drones around Gaza to gas people. He appropriates concentration camp and Holocaust imagery. He makes jokes about concentration camps, although he's deleted those tweets and social media posts of them. Makes jokes about it. And again, Jews are this evil people who are conspiring with police departments around the world and oppressive armies and regimes around the world to oppress people of color. And they're doing it in a way that's unknown, and they're persuading pure, innocent police officials from the United States who visit to come back as rabid racists. So he's got this whole conspiracy theory. For him, Jews are causing worldwide harm, despite Israel being far less than 0.2% of the population, 0.02% of the world population, causing harm to all the brown and black people in the world. And for Arthur Butts, we fake white people are causing harm to all of the actual white people. And as I delved deeply, I found these conspiracy theories endemic in academia, which is the frightening thing. It's more, and this is what I really worry about, it's not about just this or that problem on campus. Professor Jasper Puah wrote a book. She's a full professor at Rutgers. She's visiting this year, visiting professor at University of Chicago, acclaimed rock star sort of professor. She wrote a book that, among other things, it's an amazing book. I almost want to pull it down, but it's unbelievable that Jews, Zionists, are harvesting organs of Palestinians to be implanted in Israelis, that Jews are using technological biometric computer hacking of the DNA of the Palestinians to systemically starve them. I mean, it's almost voodoo stuff. Any good thing a Jew has ever done was really part of an evil plot. Now, her book passed peer review, so was considered kosher, if you will. Her book was published by Duke University Press and won the best book award of the Women's Studies Association. This is a book that can't survive a 10-minute Google check, but yet it's okay. There's another professor at Northwestern University, Jessica Winigar, wrote a book. You can't even understand it unless you think Jews are terribly, terribly evil. Hillel rabbis are in quotes. So here's what I worry about. These conspiracy theories about Jews are masquerading as scholarship. And what happens on campus, and then everybody footnotes each other. You know, everybody's footnoting Angela Davis or Jasper Puah or Stephen Thrasher or Stephen Saleta, another rock star, who, by the way, when you talk about Stephen Saleta, since you read the book, you know, this isn't going to surprise you, but I was blown away because on the left, people also, and Stephen Saleta is a leader of that, deny the Holocaust. Here's what he writes. The Nazi Holocaust in Europe seems a direct antecedent to Israel's founding. There were plans from the outset of Zionism to rid the promised land of its indigenous population. So here's a professor on the left, again, a peer-reviewed book that alleges that not only, like Butts, did the Jews make up the Holocaust, It's a myth. Here, they caused the Holocaust as part of a multi-generational plot against Palestinian people. Who'd have thunk it? Who'd have thunk it? But yet this is written in prose. I've read the book. It makes you want to throw up, but it's what students are being taught. I was with a student the other week from the University of Massachusetts, and on a final exam, one of the questions was, it was a multiple choice test, and the correct answer was Israel is an apartheid state. These things are being taught as facts. If you don't answer that, you're obviously your grade is hurt. And the problem is not that we have to train and help students, because students don't have the social capital. We have to go with the universities. We have to get them to go back to being places of intellectual pursuit, as opposed to having a mission for social change and ridding the world, at least the river to the sea of Jews, which seems to be in some universities like one of the main missions. It's a serious problem. I took all of my free time for 20 months to write this book. And that's where I'm spending time, evenings and, whenever I can, trying to get this out there. Because if this happens, by the way, it's not only bad for the Jews. When we start believing in conspiracy theories, we lose the ability to talk to each other. We lose the ability to reason with each other. And that means that society in the United States, we're going to be in civil war light. And that's bad for the Jews. Because if there's one thing, and I'm going to pass the baton back to you, if there's one thing that's for sure, is that both sides will blame the Jews.
Unfortunately, we as Jews are scapegoats, and we see that, and we've seen that throughout all of our history, honestly, and we're seeing that even more so on campuses, especially after the recent conflict, the war between Israel and Hamas, almost a year ago now. It's really it was interesting to see the response of students to students, and I think to your point, when you said that someone was being asked to answer a test question with Israel's an apartheid state. I mean, those are great reprisals that students really do feel. And that's where, we feel as alumni, we need to shed light on that when that does happen, make administrators aware, because we've kind of come to the realization that a lot of times administrations, frankly, don't understand the severity or the seriousness of what's happening on campus in specific instances. And I think that's our role, certainly as alumni, to shed light. You obviously talk a lot about conspiracy theory. I'd love if you can define the difference between like a theory and a conspiracy theory, and how you kind of use that definition within your book.
Well, it's actually a very important point, because that's sort of the slippery slope that academia has fallen down. So let me take a more neutral, if you will, for this conversation issue. Let's say that you can have, and you should, as an academic, you can have a theory about a conspiracy. You can be wondering, for example, was the COVID-19 virus leaked from the Wuhan virology lab? And what you would do is, with that theory, is try to get all the facts you can get, all the data you can get, and then decide either it's more likely that it was leaked, it's more likely that it wasn't leaked, which, by the way, should be your null hypothesis. Your first impulse should be it wasn't leaked, or we just don't have enough data to know for sure. That's a theory about a conspiracy, and you go and you marshal facts and you recognize the limits of your knowledge. A theory about a conspiracy is okay. A conspiracy theory isn't okay, because the big difference is that the facts go around the conspiracy. The facts are subsumed by the theory. I had one academic say to me that she preferred theory to facts because facts are messy and theory is pure. But it used to be when I was on campus, about when the dinosaurs roamed Fifth Avenue, that um, that you put up a theory, and then you would spend all your time throwing facts at the theory, trying to knock it down. And if the theory stood, it would be okay for the next day. And then you'd start throwing facts at it again, and they would be real facts. And it wouldn't matter. I tell the story in the book. I there was someone who I had the privilege of learning under, was one of the so-called second wave feminists, was involved in starting up the women's studies department. Heaven help you if you just said some sycophantic agreement, with her theory, or you threw out facts that weren't true. She'd knock you right down. She wouldn't. And, frankly, the same thing went for Marxists in those days. But now you can't really do that. You can't really challenge theory. And here's the problem with conspiracy theories, is that Aristotle long ago found that there were three ways to persuade people: logos, ethos, and pathos. Logos, you marshal facts. Ethos, you marshal, certain experts, and essentially second order data. Pathos was you went for someone's heart or emotions, and that was the most convincing. Because once you get someone's pathos, it's very hard to convince them with facts. Very, very hard. And when people enter conspiracy theories, it's very hard to get them out. I mean, I wrote this book not for people who are in the conspiracy theories, but for people who are still just maybe biased. If someone's just biased, you can bring them out. They just don't like Jews. But once, and you can try to prove to them the Jews aren't so bad. But once they believe that there's the secret cabal of Jews doing all sorts of evil stuff, you're never going to be able to convince them, because you can't dissuade them you can't disprove the negative, that there's the secret cabal doing stuff. And when people believe in these secret cabals, they believe they have a special knowledge. So the same thing holds for QAnon. It holds for Alex Jones. And the thing about conspiracy theories, and this is another point that I talk about in the book, is that they generally are politically motivated. So Alex Jones claimed that the victims of Sandy Hook, the 20 children, the 6 teachers, were all actors. Now, why did he do that? He actually knew better, and as has come out in litigation. But he doesn't like gun control. And so the best way to sort of circumvent people advocating for gun control as a result of Sandy Hook was to say it didn't happen. It was politically motivated. And by the way, that's the case with most conspiracy theories. I mentioned Jasper Puar earlier. She actually is one of those people that probably certainly knows and admitted as much in a speech at Vassar, which some of you may have read about, where she says she brings the speculative into the now. In other words, she's making stuff up because it's useful. She says, by the way, that's one of the clearer things that she says, if anybody ever wants to read her book. How this could, in all candor, win a Best Book Award is astounding. I mean, I don't know, almost an unintelligible book, except the hatred of Jews comes through. That's the only clear thing. But she says that, in the end, she says in the end, nonviolence isn't going to work. But we need to have the nonviolent BDS as part of the violent BDS, the violent overthrow of the Jews from the river to the sea. So people know what they're doing. and it's useful. And they can also bring in a lot of Nuchschleppers.
I love all of the Yiddishkeit references you make in all your chapters that your father taught you. It reminds me of my grandfather, who was a survivor as well, and it definitely made it more family oriented in my eyes reading the book. I know you just mentioned a little bit about the far right with Alex Jones and whatnot. I'd love to hear. I think what was also interesting within the book is that you pinpoint both far left and far right kind of conspiracy theories. I'd love if you can delve into that. Like, what are the differences between the left and the right of like their approach towards anti-Zionism or anti-Semitism, if you will, and what did you find in your research for this book?
So that was one of the things that surprised me. And I actually was talking to a group that had read my book, and I said, I said, you could actually, if you want to do your own research, I wouldn't call it amusing, because it's not. But it's deeply ironic. Is that you could almost always find a parallel, or sometimes the right and the left saying the exact same thing. I didn't expect far left people to deny the Holocaust, but yet they do. I just showed you Steve Saleta. I didn't expect far left people to mock the Holocaust and the concentration camps, but yet they do. I also didn't expect the Institute for Historical Revision to be posting articles, essays, speeches, videos from people on the far left. The far right it's the Institute for Historical Revision is basically an Arthur Butts affiliated entity. But they reposted Ilhan Omar, who they probably object to for lots of reasons, just as a person, because she was an immigrant, because she's a person of color, because she's a socialist / Marxist, all of the above. Not a fascist, but because she hates Jews, they post her and they laud her. David Duke called her the most important person in Congress. And there's this sense that the far right, and this is actually, unfortunately, just wrong, that the far right somehow is okay with Zionism. But I show how Richard Spencer and a whole bunch of other people on the far right are not. Richard Spencer is definitely anti-Zionist. David Duke writes about Jewish conspiracies from Israel. And we think BDS is something that started with Omar Bugatti in the late 1990s. But the reality is, and I said this, and this is also, I wouldn't say I found it funny, but I found it ironic that the first BDS attempt at organizing a BDS against Israel was done from the far right. William Luther Pierce, who was involved in a lot of the neo-Nazi movements, organized a shareholders proposal to have McDonnell Douglas not supply replenishment materials to Israel. Actually organized a shareholder referendum. So in the beginning, they had the idea of BDS use corporate machinery to affect and harm Israel. And that's what Morningstar, to a great degree, is doing now. Whether they do it, for anybody who's listening from Illinois, the Illinois Pension Board is looking at them. Because, and I show this in the book, I was very surprised at how the far left is using corporate apparatus, which they otherwise might disdain, to harm Israel. Because the one thing that's clear, if you can harm Israel, if you can libel Jews, libel Zionists, you're good to go.
Really interesting. It's true. And to point made a little while back about calling for boycotting of our American police forces and whatnot going to Israel to learn tactics and whatnot. That's something we see in a very prevalent way on campuses. They call it, the anti-Israel movement calls it the deadly exchange program.
Yeah.
And we've had ACF specifically has worked on many campuses to help counter this deadly exchange kind of action on campus. And I think
and the sad thing is, that was one movement, which again surprised me in my research. It was not started by the Palestinians. It was started by Jewish Voice for Peace. They're the ones who wrote the original deadly exchange materials.
And they're I would say just as much of an adversary as Students for Justice in Palestine, AMP, and the like as well. I just find it very interesting that they all use, as a Jew, you should not be doing X, Y, or Z, and what have you.
And of course, Mr. O'Brien from Amnesty International also claims to speak for the Jews. He said he doesn't believe that most Jews support Israel in his heart. Thank you, Mr. O'Brien, for expressing my opinions.
Please. You brought up a lot of different professors, and I can tell you that historically we've worked to counter them. Jasper Puar spoke at Vassar College, which is the first chapter of Alums for Campus Fairness. Our co-founders are alumni there, and unfortunately, we're quite familiar with the work there. How were you able to read these books, these detractor books, these different essays in doing your research? Like, how were you able to get through it? And I guess what were the biggest lessons that you learned while reading it, for your book or just in general of greater knowledge?
Well, I have to say this, that reading some of these books, I really felt like I was jumping into a cesspool without goggles on. I mean, I felt reading it dirty. I felt just being exposed to it was dirty. And I also felt this sense of incredible rage. I mean, an uncontrollable rage against Jews, Zionists. I mean, that's it seems to be untethered to anything that happens in the rest of these folks' lives. And there is something, and this is why our folks, and I talk about this a little in the book, but it's still an open question. Why do people hate Jews so badly that they're willing to throw them into standby while they go to the concentration camps? I mean, in my father's town, the Jews tried to hide, and they were all turned in. The ones that weren't gathered up initially were all turned in by the locals. So there's definitely this sense that these folks have been hacked. They have been hacked on a very deep pathos level, and they are consistently conspiracy theories because it's consistently in this reading. And that's what I guess surprised me. I didn't realize how ubiquitous Jews are in conspiracy theories. As a matter of fact, as I read them, almost all conspiracy theories, from the Denver airport conspiracy theory to QAnon, they all seem to have, if they have a political motivation, they all seem to have something to do with Jews. I mean, the only major ones that I found didn't have anything to do with Jews were Paul McCartney is dead or Elvis is alive. Otherwise, if you read just about anything, the funny thing is, other researchers, people who just have written, and I cite some of these folks, Javon Byford and Qasim Qassam, who are scholars of conspiracy theories, they're also surprised. I mean, they're not focused in the same way that we are on this phone about, Jews, because we are the canaries in the coal mine, and we don't want to be the first to be dead. But they're also sort of puzzled. just in reviewing the theories themselves. Why is it always the Jews? And it's a problem that we have to come to grips with, and it is a sign historically of unhealthy societies. So jumping into this, how do you cope with it? I mean, there were times when I just really did have to take a walk.
Mhm.
Even if it was like 10:30, 11 at night, I just had to go out and take a walk, because it's just hard to go to sleep even after reading about these folks. And what really worries me is, to the extent that this is ubiquitous on campus, what stays on campus doesn't remain on campus. It's not like Vegas. I can't say that often enough. If I said it once already in this, people think, oh, these are just professors. They're writing stuff. Nobody cares. Students, they're going to calm down once they go to, get a job and get real life. That's not happening. That's not happening. And we see that's not happening in the rest of society either. What's happening in campus is spreading to all of society.
Absolutely. I think that's what I found as well, that we've certainly found, is that it's not just a campus issue. It's a cultural issue. It's happening across communities all over. And it's bigger than just campus. And at the same time, campus is certainly a hotbed and a place that needs proper representation. I'm curious why you think, these biased professors, are so prominent across these academic institutions. I mean, you said yourself that I forget who it was. It's considered like a bestseller or what have you. Like, why do you think that they've been able to become prominent? What caused this kind of shift, even in the last 10, 15 years, or maybe even 20 years, since like SJP was founded at Berkeley back in 2000-ish, I want to say. Why are these professors getting this platform and having this ability to become these kind of prominent members of the anti-Israel movement?
Well, first of all, we haven't recognized, and I applaud Alums for Campus Fairness, and I applaud other organizations working in this space. Our opponents and our enemies and the people who want us expunged, or they want all Jews expunged except for those who agree with them. Jews who agree with them are fine. Anybody who doesn't agree with them, there is no anti-Semitism that's possible. They're just getting what they deserve. And I'm not exaggerating. Is that these are smart people. They have a long-term strategic plan. They have been executing it well, making sure that, I've looked at a number of places where the job description essentially means you need to be anti-Israel. When Steven Saleta was up for tenure, the position was written for him. It was incredible. And so there's people like, it used to be Norman Finkelstein made a living by just going from campus to campus and getting honorariums, $3,000 and $5,000 honorariums, because he was an anti-Israel Jewish advocate. So this is extraordinarily mindful. It's mindful on the part of some of the presses. If you look at Duke University Press, which I talked about before, there are 10 pages of anti-Israel books. On the Kurds, which have a population of, 10 times, they're another ethnic group in the Middle East, population 10 times that of Israel, lots of issues around Kurds and Kurdistan. There's like 2 books. So you get rewarded for being anti-Israel. You get lauded for being anti-Israel. And professors choose who gets accepted for faculty positions. They choose who gets accepted for PhD candidacy. Stephen Thrasher probably, if he had said he was a Zionist, there's no way would have been accepted by the American Studies Department at NYU. There's just no way. And if you look at other departments, the anthropology department at Northwestern, you're not going to survive a day thinking that if you don't acknowledge as uncontestably true and self-evident that Zionists are trying to oppress anthropologists, no exaggeration, then you're not even going to make it into being considered for a position or graduate student candidacy. And it's well organized, and now that show is being taken on the road with the DSA, which used to be a pro-Israel organization, has been embraced and extinguished in terms of that. Morningstar, some of the other ESG movements are being targeted because of their pivotal position. The opponents of Israel are very smart to start with the campuses. Qatar has donated more than $23 billion to American universities. They've donated more abroad. They know what they're doing. They're getting a great return on their investment. And we are so far behind. It is ridiculous. That's why I spent all my time writing this book, because you know what? There was a time, I don't want to go into, were we in the 20s, 30s? We may be in the 1890s in France, though, for sure, where anti-Jewishness becomes just like, chlorine in the water.
Interesting. We're talking a lot. First of all, for everyone in the audience, feel free to ask questions in the Q&A, and we're going to bring them in and ask where we can. So we have a few questions here that I want to ask you and pose to you from some members of our audience. One of them is, what could be? We're talking about what's happening, the different issues with professors and whatnot. So what can be done about all this anti-Zionist, anti-Israel, anti-Semitic rhetoric on campus and other places? What do you see is a solution, a step forward, etc.?
So first of all, I think we have to make our voices heard, and we have to get trustees involved. We have to approach trustees directly. We're gonna have to use our social capital, which I have, when it comes to Northwestern, because that happens to be my alma mater, and it's not going to be pleasant. But we have to also not just make this about the Jews. We have to make it about fair and free academic inquiry. It can't be that anti-Zionism is uncontestable and unimpeachably true. I mean, it has to be that other sorts of that facts are taught, and we have to go in with that sort of agenda. We have to do it at the administration level, at the trustee level. Faculty is going to take a long time, and a lot of faculty, the Judith Butlers of the world, are unconvincible. She would think if everybody on this call were murdered, that would be probably okay with her. Or maybe put on some, deserted island someplace. But it's really, the rhetoric coming out of the far left is really, really bad. And there is a lot of hate out there. And to a certain degree, we have to show it. We shouldn't just try to ignore it. And we have to deal with it, not focusing on the students. We have to focus on the faculty and on the administration. Administrations, by the way, they do ultimately have to engage to some degree because they get money from legislators, particularly the public universities, private universities in terms of donations. And while most administrations don't have spines, they do have to live under state law, and they do in some cases have to recognize the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. They do have to worry about Title VI, and you have to go straight at them, because they really, otherwise, if you don't, they'll give you all sorts of nicey face words until the cows come home.
100%. I think I said this to you when we met last, and that is, we see ourselves as a grassroots organization that we're chipping away at the armor of these administrators by constantly bringing up different issues that are coming up on campuses and having our alumni signing our petitions or our letter writing campaigns, and chipping away at the armor, because they need to understand that we're not going away. The issue isn't going away, and we need to find solutions here and ensure that Jewish students are being protected on campuses. We work closely with many organizations who work with faculty. The Academic Engagement Network and Scholarship for Peace in the Middle East are two who ring a bell for me offhand, and we're proud to work with them. I always find that it's a little bit of a challenge to work with trustees, because some of them don't want to ruffle any feathers, if you will, and they want to lose that that honor of being on the board of trustees. So it's always a challenge. At the same time, I think that administrations are starting to slowly understand the severity of what's going on. And one of our actions always in our petitions are calling for the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. Why not give these administrators another tool in their toolbox to be able to say, okay, this action was clearly anti-Semitic because of this definition, and that's it, as opposed to being kind of ambiguous and whatnot. Moving on, we only have a little bit of time left with you, but someone asked recently, have you ever had, this is a good question, actually, I'm curious. Have you ever had a discussion in a public forum with any of these people that you've researched? And if so, how did it turn out, when you asked for facts, etc.?
None of these people want to engage in a public forum.
Have you tried?
Well, I will tell you, in the case of Northwestern, I have made some attempts, but the problem is that they don't really want to get out of their comfort zone, and if they did, they just don't. Angela Davis, for example, never appears on anything to the right, of Democracy Now. Stephen Thrasher, if you look at where he's, he has reconfirmed on his Twitter page, that he's checked with some Jews and he's definitely not an anti-Semite. It's within the echo chamber. And so far, that's really been a successful strategy. There are very few public forums that these folks engage with anybody. I mean, Yossi Klein-Halevi, for the first time, who went to Northwestern, he overlapped with me. He's a few years older.
I didn't know he went to Northwestern.
He got his graduate degree there. He was there also when Arthur Butts. He was getting his master's degree. I was an undergrad, and great guy. But now he gets shut down on campus, and there are protests outside. They don't want anybody to question the facts. Remember, these facts have to be unquestionable, uncontestable. You have to, before you enter the room, understand that Zionism is evil. And if you don't understand that, and by the way, you should normalize Zionists, which is a way of saying dehumanizing and dehumanizing, so that if they, if the Jews are eliminated from the river to the sea, that's okay, because they're not really human. They were never really should be normalized. So it's a whole theory of not wanting to engage in a public forum. They mindfully don't want to, and so it's a fantasy. I frankly would a fantasy would be that we could have a debate, but that's not in their interests. Their interest is to tell their followers that there are no other facts, and don't listen to them. And if they want to talk, shout them down, because heaven forbid that you'll learn a fact that's different than what I'm telling you is my conspiracy theory.
For sure. Having worked on campus with students, I can tell you that Students for Justice in Palestine, SJP, has an anti-normalization role where they won't work with Hillels or Chabads or anything because they recognize Israel, and they do not want to normalize that. And so I can tell you the students with whom I've worked in the past have tried to have these debates, have tried to have, these respectable kind of programs that time and again have gotten rejected because it doesn't meet their own conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
100%. And
So-
and clearly that's the same things happening on a higher level, academic level with professors and whatnot.
Well, Judith Butler she organized a meeting at, I think, Penn, not Penn, what's it called? The Modern Language Association, which she chaired.
Yep.
And they basically wouldn't let anybody who was not anti-Zionist enter the room. And when one person asked a question and they suspected the person was a Zionist and, wouldn't continue with the person in.
Absolutely. We have a little bit of a long question, but bear with me as I read through it from another someone else on our webinar. Does articulating such a conspiracy theory that slanders and libels Jews as a whole offer the faculty who do it a way to virtue signal and in turn enhancing their status and power, of stifling the free discussion of opposing viewpoints?
Well, yeah, I see the question now.
Okay.
I mean, I would say, look, the answer is, broadly, yes. Broadly, the way to virtue signal. Look, this happened recently in Austin when Representative Ocasio-Cortez was jeered because she abstained on the Iron Dome resolution and, was called a bunch of names. So her response was to say that the United States is putting children in cages in internment camps here, and Jews in Israel are putting Palestinian children in cages. Now, clearly she just made that up on the spot, but it was a way to virtue signal that really she does hate Israel. And professors, the only way to really distinguish yourself now, because the Israel hatred is so ubiquitous, is to get ever more vociferous. And otherwise, you're not distinguishable. If you just think Israel isn't such a good idea, that's not really going to get you anywhere. You have to come up with a new theory. I mean, I've read some of these articles. Usually I just read the abstract because I don't need to read the whole article, and they're just, on since I've written the book, and professors here and there. I mean, there's cases where unfortunately, there are professors that don't talk to their family members because they're so busy coming up with new theories of evil stuff that sounds fanciful, that the Jews in Israel, that Zionists are doing. I mean, it's almost unbelievable. I mean, the one book that I mentioned that Professor Winnegar wrote, I mean, Zionists are really spending their time policing anthropology departments. And then she found that there was no evidence of it, and then said that made it all the more true because the Jews are so good at covering up. I mean, it is so preposterous, and yet she's lauded for that. It's a virtue signaling, but it's a very strange one.
Sure, thank you. We have only a few minutes left. Let's do one more question and then maybe we can end it quickly. And the last question from our audience is, do you think that Jews should toughen up and be willing to speak out more vociferously and call out our opponents as biased, prejudiced, and haters, et cetera? Do you think that would be beneficial?
Yes.
Simple
I
enough.
mean, I mean, I can talk more about it, but the answer is definitely yes. I mean, I talked to trustees. I mean, I talk about this in the book. I talked to several trustees of Northwestern. I've talked to the president of a major university who is Jewish and I know is committed to Israel. But, in the United States, we don't have knighthoods. So the closest thing to a knighthood, to be able to be called a sir or a dame, seems to be named to a board of a university. In this case, this person is president of a university. And yet when I talk to him about, very specifically anti-Semitic happenings at that campus, by professors, sort of shrugs and discomfort, but not going to lead him to resign. And not going to lead people to some Jews not to be dissuaded from making donations. So yeah, we need to toughen up. We need to toughen up. My father had a word for that too, but yeah, I don't know if it was so printable.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously professors also use their platform if they're tenured to kind of, once they're tenured, to go out with these conspiracy theories. I think all of your professors that you researched and that you cited in your book were all tenured professors.
Well, not all of them.
Not all of them.
There are places you can get tenure and be, as anti-Israel as you want. Northwestern completed the hiring of and made Dr. Thrasher chair of the social studies reporting after he had already jettisoned his prepared remarks at the NYU doctoral convocation, and talked about how proud he was of BDS and the like. So you can have a great career. There's no career consequences. Sammy Hermes at Northwestern thinks pretty close to, he doesn't say it exactly, but pretty close to thinking that Hassan Nasrallah should get the Nobel Prize and is in the same league as Mahatma Gandhi and Nelson Mandela. And as most of your listeners know, he thinks every Jew on the planet should be murdered. Couldn't do that in most places, but yet he's been promoted, as I followed him, from assistant, associate, full professor, head of now the Cutter's liberal arts program at Northwestern.
So interesting. This is some heavy stuff. I'd love to end this. I know that we have a hard stop in a couple minutes. What are some lessons that the readers can take from the book? What are some things on top of that maybe, this is Alums for Campus Fairness. What are the things that alumni can or should be doing as well? Love to hear maybe some good takeaways for our audience.
So I can say this because I think the first 100 people are getting the book for free. When I gave a talk outside of Rutgers, that I was actually amazed at the turnout on. This was, even with COVID in person, more than 100 people near Rutgers and more people on Zoom, because Rutgers is a place that was against anti-Semitism until they decided to be in favor of anti-Semitism.
I remember, yeah.
And I said to the group, you are taxpayers and you're paying Jasper Puar's salary. Take the book and send it to your legislators, which some did, and give it to the trustees or other materials. It doesn't have to necessarily be my book, but we need to start putting facts. There's too much hand waving going on in the Jewish community. That's why I wrote the book. There's other people who are writing the book. There's tremendously good stuff coming out of the Academic Engagement Network and various affiliates that you're involved with, through Israel Campus Coalition and others. So there's a lot of good stuff coming out. Take the facts, don't hand wave, but you gotta, as they say in certain social justice movements, you have to do the work. You have to do the work. If you're not doing the work, then as Natan Sharansky said, the biggest problem is the people who keep silent. Nobody on this call, I'm sure, is keeping silent, but it's not so much fun to actually go and complain and set a meeting with a legislator, set a meeting with a trustee, set a meeting with a VP of something. It's not so much fun, but we got to do it.
100%. I couldn't agree more. We help provide at Alums for Campus Fairness talking points with strategies on ways to do that. So feel free to reach out to us and to our team so we can work with you and and even with Scott, if his time allows. I know you're very busy. But I wanted to conclude and thank you for your time and for joining us on our Alumni Spotlight webinar series, where we were really honored to have you. Your book is phenomenal. I'm excited for our first 100 folks to get your book and to hopefully read the book and really internalize it and use it towards the future. As a reminder to everyone, our next big program is our virtual conference taking place on Sunday, April 3rd. Scott will be joining us again there as part of a panel. We have some great panelists joining us, partners like from the Israel on Campus Coalition and from the Academic Engagement Network and many more organizations, as well as our keynote speaker, Eve Barlow. So we're very thrilled to be having this conference, and Scott, for you to be joining us once again to discuss some of your expertise and to share your knowledge. So thank you for joining us. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Again, if you have any questions or anything, please do feel free to reach out to us, and we are happy to make connections and to help counter, this greater anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism happening across campuses across the country. So thank you all, and have a great evening and a great rest of the week. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.